welcome to our Kepler College Astrology Book Club author Q&A, everyone. My name is Misty Lane, and I'm your book club admin. And our February book of the month was Astrology by Moonlight by Tara Aal and Aswin. Aswin is a fifth-generation astrologer from India with a foundation in Vedic astrology, but has a keen interest in Hellenistic and medieval astrology. So his practice is a blend of all three traditional forms. He is extremely focused on bridging the gap between the Eastern and medieval Persian European forms of astrology. And Tara is an evolutionary astrologer, writist, artist, and tarot reader. Her approach to the archetypes is experiential and creative, including the astrological technique of planets on the first. Along with her various writing and speaking engagements, Tara serves on the ISAR board as marketing director.
I think that's an old bio. I'm sure I sent an
It's
updated one, but just so you know, I'm VP for ESAR.
Ooh,
But
okay. She's VP now. Yeah, I just summarized the bios that were in the book, so thank you for correcting that.
oh yeah, no, totally. But there's a lot. I'm so glad. Yeah, there's actually a lot of things have changed. That's one thing I've learned now with the book is you're like, man, some things are going to be in print forever, even when they've changed, and some things you wish you would not
Mhm.
have in there. So yeah.
Well, we're always changing and growing, like the phases
Sure.
of the moon.
Sure. On point. On point. Nice.
Yes. So we're streaming to you live today so they can share their expertise with club members, answer questions our readers sent in about the book. Anyone in the chat or catching us on their Facebook feed, if you have any questions for the authors, I will be keeping an eye out on the chat. So feel free to ask any questions you have along the way. Okay, so this is our first book that we have that's been co-authored. So can you guys tell us a little bit about how and why you came together to write this book?
Yeah, it's nature's call.
Nature's
To,
Call.
to put it in one word, do you want to talk about it?
No, you start. You're good. Yeah.
Okay.
Ultimately, I mean, literally I was in India and we were already working together, but that's really when you kind of pitched the idea to do the book. So I like it when you start the story.
Right. So I think it goes back to Smiljana Gavrankic's Infinity Astrological magazine. So our first thanks should go to her, because if not for her, I wouldn't have found out Tara's work. And I reached out to her, and then we had a good friendship going on very quickly. Then we started, I think we did a podcast or something together where this idea of moon came up. And then after the podcast, we started discussing about the moon in Indian perspective and also from the Western evolutionary perspective. And we had two kind of different ideas where moon can be this emotional mind, while Mercury can be this rational or logical mind. And this idea kind of triggered almost everything that forms the basis of this book. And then we wrote an article to kind of describe this entire idea and try to kind of elaborate on this from a phasal perspective. And we pitched this idea. Once we wrote this, we pitched this idea to Frank Clifford. At that particular point of time, he was associated with the Mountain Astrologer. And he sent it to the editors, but at that point, the editing team was not very keen on publishing something on the moon. So we thought we would reach out to someone else. But ultimately, we kind of decided against it. And in the middle came this conference in New Delhi where Tara and Darren came over to in New Delhi, and we met as a family there in Delhi. And we had a really good time there, and we bonded together. And I just said that there is one idea, but we'll discuss once you're back to the US. And then we met via Zoom, and then we discussed about this idea. And from then on, the only answer was just yes. There was no other divine choice that we had. So and yeah, that's where it all started.
You just had to do it.
Yeah, we just had to do it. So basically, one wild idea about the moon and Mercury led to a book which ended up being published by Llewellyn, which is also very, very serendipitous, considering the considering what we thought, because uh, I was very, very particular and keen on these thoughts and being protective and all those. But I think Tara kind of opened my eyes up to what really matters, and then now it's like I can't be more happy. So
And now
yeah,
now I am teaching a predictive course with Ashwin. So it
Yeah.
comes full circle.
yeah, it is.
For
Yeah,
Kepler.
it really
Yeah.
is a full circle.
Oh.
Yeah,
And that's coming up in our spring term,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Okay.
it's part of the required curriculum for the predictive course. But I think one of the things that, at least for me, that's been so amazing about this experience is just the way that we've worked together. Different types of astrology, different cultures, kind of different everything. It sort of brought everything full circle in a way for me, because we'd be having conversations and just the way Ashwin would say something would make me rethink something that I thought was basic. And then all of a sudden I would understand it in a different way. Right. And so that for me, and astrologically, I have a North Node in Sagittarius in the 9th house. So Ashwin's like perfect to like pull me on my, pull me on my little path of destiny. But yeah, it's, many people have heard this before, but maybe not any of you here, that we met very few times to write this book. There's something about the way, and it's not that we don't have to meet, but there's something about the way we work together that is almost kind of moon-like in the sense of it's intuitive, right? I think, Ashwin, what do we have? Maybe 2 or 3 proper meetings the whole time we wrote the book.
3
And
meetings.
Wow.
And the rest of it, we just sort of split it up, and somehow, I don't know, which is why when you say it's a
Yeah.
divine calling, I feel like in part, we're kind of, those energies were coming through, and for whatever reason, they chose us, but we somehow had that ability to work together without, because it would have been impossible with you and I, at the time, I had another full-time job as well. Like, we could have never spent the time to have that amount of in person, even through the, computer land. So yeah, it was kind of weird.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think because I can just even talk about those meetings if you like. Like, we met once to kind of draft what we are going to do, and we just took some notes about the chapters. Basically, the chapters are Moon's relationship with all the planets. So there's not much to kind of discuss about the chapters. It's very simple. And then we talked about which part is going to be written by who. And then we had a very long break where both of us fell sick at a point, and
Same time, not
yes,
close,
almost
I
at
mean,
the
across
same
the world, so we didn't get,
Yeah. At the same time. So, and we lost track, but we never really lost track of where the book was headed. It's just that there was this, what you call as this writer's block, where 2 people have this writer's block at the same time because of the brains not functioning as it really should. And then we met to kind of get this thing going, which was our second meeting. And then we met finally before we actually wrote about the outer planets, because obviously that is Tara's forte. So I couldn't do much without her help or support. But if you ask me now, or probably even if you ask Tara about which part was written by who, both of us won't have the answer. It's very difficult. And if I was just reading the book a few minutes before we actually got in, and it was really surprising. I mean, did I even write this, or did we even write this? Like, that is how it really feels.
I was really wondering that while I was reading it, because, and I'm sure some of this might be like the editor kind of helping blend things together.
Not
No, I
much.
was like, wow, everything just blends so seamlessly. It's like one voice is writing it.
The reason why I say not much is not to discredit the editor. We had a great editor, but it's because I had already done all the editing, because we were going to self-publish. So by the time we got to Llewellyn, like, there was very little editing. They made a couple suggestions to add an intro and to shuffle a couple things that actually made a big difference, but the rest of it, yeah. And it's so funny. And as far as splitting the stuff up, just so sometimes we split chapters, sometimes we each did part of a chapter. So there really is, like, I have the same experience now where I'm like,
No, I think it's always the part of the chapters. Like we never split the chapters, but it's always the part of the chapters. It's
yeah,
just that who wrote the first part and who wrote the second part
I know.
of
And
the
then you
chapter.
want, yeah. And the extra interesting part is, so of course, when at the time when Ashwin was the one writing, especially like the individual descriptions, right? So, Moon, Jupiter, whatever phase. So when he would write the ones that were mine, there were times where I would like message him and I'd be like, how did you know to write it that way? Do you know what I mean? Like, because it was like, I was like, so we had so many of these fun things. I was kind of worried about this Q&A. I'm like, what if they ask questions and I can't answer questions and it's my own book?
No,
Uh,
I think yeah, even I had the same problem, but I think it's I realized that it's also kind of a thing that every writer has. So
Yeah.
maybe it's like, even if we read those articles that we wrote a few years ago,
Yeah.
it really feels like, I mean, did I even write it?
I know. It was a fun little thing. As I was sitting down this morning, I pulled out my old notebooks, like from around that time. And so I have this little note in here. As I was doing the final editing of the chapter for the moon and Uranus, there was an earthquake here in Los Angeles. Like, I made a note of it. So I'm just saying, so this
Oh
is just
my
an example of
gosh.
things that, like, I feel like that sort of exemplifies kind of the whole book, in the sense of it just felt like sort of everything was aligning with it, if that makes sense. And
Wow, that
I'd
is
forgotten that.
so,
So I was like, whoa.
it happened in perfect alignment. I actually really enjoyed the Moon Uranus chapter. I think I would have to say that was probably one of my favorite chapters in the
Really?
book.
Oh,
I do feel like you both drop so much, even just like outside of the astrological aspect to this, you drop so much fantastic philosophical wisdom. And the Moon Uranus chapter was really one of those chapters where I think just really hit like that.
Cool. I'd be
Yes.
curious
that's
if anybody
great.
else, like, that's like, we don't get that feedback all that much.
Yeah,
So it's
it's
like,
it's
yo,
good to hear.
sure, yeah.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. So I want to talk about your different astrological traditions and how this book is a blend of Eastern and Western astrological approaches. I know when I was very first starting out with astrology and just starting to explore all the different types of astrology that I could potentially learn about, one astrologer who I knew kind of really discouraged me from exploring multiple traditions at one time for the sake
Hmm.
of like
Interesting.
confusion, cultural inaccuracies. But the more I progress in my studies, I've found myself meeting several astrologers who do blend multiple traditions. So, what do you
Yeah,
think is helpful about that blend?
Mm.
I'll let you go first this time.
Well, no, I mean, what do I think is beneficial about that? So I don't know. I mean, everyone has their own view, right? I kind of just see it as whatever lens you want to take. I don't see
Mhm.
one really as, right, wrong, or better, worse than the other. But for me, um, like, kind of like I was saying at the beginning, the more I learn different traditions or different pieces from different traditions, the more I understand where, number one, where some things came from. So let me just now speak as someone who's trained mostly as a modern astrologer. When I spend more time going back and looking at the history, right, of the more traditional astrology, I actually understand more how what we're working with now, where it comes
Yeah,
from, right?
Mhm.
And without that connection, honestly, like, there is a disconnect. So, and I
yes,
I mean, even just very recently, right? There's one of the things I do is I teach. I teach private classes with groups of people. And so this year is the first year that I put more emphasis on just the basic history. And I credit Chris Brennan for that. Does a fantastic job of going back through, all the years and all the different, eras of different types of astrology. But I think sometimes we get so excited to push forward into something new that we forget where we come from, and then we don't have then we don't have that bridge. So
right.
for me, I guess it's, even though it may be quote unquote older, it actually enriches what is newer. And also it reminds me some things aren't new. Like we sometimes think they are, and they're absolutely not. So I am, I have another astrologer friend, Colin Bedell, who says he's non-denominational, which is kind of like one of, now I like to pick up on that, because as Ashwin knows, like I kind of like poking into all, different kinds of things. It gives it a richness. Like, for example, when I'm doing a session, and 95% of the time, maybe that's a little bit high, I look at the annual perfection. That's traditional,
Yes.
and those traditional astrologers, they might, they might find some fault with the house system I use or how I integrate that entirely. But regardless, that adds a layer that is, that is strong, and it plays and it resonates. So for me, I like to leave that space open. And I like to think that we're not doing something different. Again, we're just finding our way to it or through it differently. It's still astrology. So I like the idea of the unity of it. So that's, that's in part for me. I think I could understand, if you were learning, right, and trying to learn a bunch of different traditions at the same time, I could understand how that might just overwhelm your brain.
Yeah.
But for me, all the layers, and even if I'm just taking little bits and pieces of things, it's almost like a painting is more filled out. At least that's how it feels for me. I start to see, oh, that gives this context. Now I understand why I've been working with it this way, or maybe I change how I'm working with it, which is super exciting too. Like I love those moments. Even when you have to think, oh, I've actually been teaching that, for whatever, like for 6 years, and but that's great, right? Like, because the whole idea is to be learning, and oftentimes for me, I find that skipping ahead, which is something sometimes I tend to do, it's not necessarily useful. Like sometimes it's going back.
Going back to the
Yeah, sure.
basics. Absolutely. What about you, Ashwin?
I think it's extremely liberating to hear from an evolutionary astrologer saying that it's important to connect to the ancestral tradition in a world where we are extremely sometimes polarized in terms of traditions as well. So I think this is the kind of approach that is something that we need to develop as an astrological community. And for me, the blend has always been an inherent part of my work, because I was introduced to astrology with a foundation in Indian tradition, but I quickly started inculcating some of the very, very fundamental, foundational ideas and philosophical techniques from the Greek and Persian astrology. And that is where I kind of grew as an astrologer, right? Um, and I also kind of developed this habit of trying to read modern texts, especially, after getting introduced to Tara Aal, so it's basically like I started studying some of Stephen Forrest and other modern esoteric astrologers. So Tara brought me some books from US, and that includes Alan Oken's Complete Astrology, which was my first full modern astrology book, and that was in 2019. So before that, I was only completely into traditional works. So that was basically one of the first books of modern astrology. But still, I never kind of shut my doors at anything. So, and some people kind of tend to think that Rudhyarian idea of phases is very, very modern or humanistic. But it is not very modern. It is actually very, very ancient. And the relationship between the planets has been the foundation of astronomy and geometry. And to kind of understand the colors and the flavors of the moon as it kind of progresses through the 12 signs or houses of the zodiac has always been there. Like it's been there since the Chaldeans or Babylonians or Indians or Greeks, whomsoever you want to attribute the origins of astrology to. It's always been there. And as of now, at least as of today, I've not read a single text that is as visceral, literal, and also comprehensive as Firmicus Metanus's work, at least with the moon. So whenever I have to kind of think about the moon, I just go to Firmicus Maternus. So that's where the crux comes from. And then, I mean, not to kind of take any kind of credit away from the modern astrologers, I think everyone has contributed to the best of their capabilities. But still, I think, as Tara rightly mentioned, we need to kind of connect to the ancestors and the traditions, and then come forward to see how astrology has evolved over a period of time, and what our collaboration has given us is where I come from. You know, from 2000 years forward, but Tara is going basically backwards. And it's a very, very good ride. And I mean, imagine, like, I'm coming this way. I mean, I'm coming this way and she's coming this way, and we meet at a point and do something together, and then we kind of continue in our journeys. So, and
Just
as you
meeting
rightly
in the
mentioned,
middle there.
yes, we kind of came a full circle in many ways with this book, and the learning experience that I had, especially in terms of understanding the dynamics between planets, uh, especially the moon has been phenomenal for me. The learning has been great because of the collaboration. I don't think I would have kind of spent the time that I did to kind of go through a lot of these things that we did together if not for this collaboration. So I think ultimately we are grateful for the collaboration more than anything.
Yeah. And all
Yeah.
and I've never heard you say that I had to go 2000 years backward and you had to go 2000 years forward. That's so good. That's funny. Makes sense. I'd be the one going backwards, but yeah.
No, I think ultimately it's like the traversing the time that we have to.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
It doesn't matter whether you start in the front or whether you
I know.
move forward or you move back. So yeah, it's important to kind of acknowledge the history of the evolution of astrology, so that we pick up a lot of things in the middle. And I think that is how our practice and research evolves, which kind of enables us to make the best contribution that we can. So that maybe, I mean, imagine someone reading this book after 2000 years, maybe a PDF copy, but at least it will be amazing. Like two freaks from two parts of the world writing a book based
Yeah.
on Moon's relationship with all the other planets. I think that is the most wildest happiness that we would ever imagine, which we
Oh.
both of us would not be alive to see that.
Yeah.
I
Maybe we'll
hope this does happen for you 2000 years from now. I really hope that for you.
and I hope we're like in some state of consciousness where we can actually like see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I know.
Yes, that's a really wonderful perspective. We all just really start somewhere and we have to start somewhere, but it really is exploring those different traditions and getting familiar with what works for you is really important. And that's something I'm learning more about. So, yes. So this book is an exploration of lunar phases and cycles that you were speaking on. And most people, when they think of the lunar phases, think of the sun-moon relationship and the phases that we see in the sky. But this book breaks it down planet by planet and explores how we have a moon phase, not just between moon and sun, but moon and every planet as well. So how can you explain a little bit about why it's helpful to explore these phases between the moons and all of the other planets and what kind of information we can learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, I can take the first, at least part one of responding. I think that so everything has a phase, right? So it's not just the moon with every other planet. And so whereas not everybody has an aspect between things, everybody has phases between everything. And so you can, so for example, in evolutionary astrology, one of the things we focus on a lot are these phases. So in my original training, we went through I have this old chart my teacher actually made, right? It literally has the phase written in for between every single two planets. And phases show us the relationship between things. So when you're want to understanding where things are at in a cycle, like what they're actually doing together and how they're working together, phases are kind of where that's at. And so we took the kind of perspective that the moon, being the most intimate kind of personal symbol in astrology that kind of is most connected, right, with our body, our nervous system, our separate sense of self. I mean, we could probably have some arguments around, well, but sun feels like that too. But the moon hits you in the body, right? To me, the sun is more of our essence or our spirit. The moon is like body flesh, like and it is very reactive in the moment. I always say it's like our okay meter. Like every moment the moon is deciding, am I okay now? Am I okay now? Right. And as one of my teachers used to say, safety, and I don't just mean physical safety, but the idea that I am safe, whether it's emotionally, physically, mentally, is faster than the speed of light or the speed of sound, right? So that's how fast the moon's reacting to things. So if we look at how the moon is having a relationship with all these other parts of ourselves represented by the other planets, we start to learn how that integration and relationship is happening. So one of the things that we kind of would play around with is if you want more yourself, go to the moon, right? Get to the most personal place and then see how that part is interacting with the other parts. So, Ashwin started talking about this earlier with the moon Mercury part. If we say, and by the way, everything is more than what we say, right? We all know this. Every conversation about astrology, no matter what it is, like I feel like I like put this little like warning before anything I say these days. I just say whatever I say is a very small fraction of what is there. I also don't think Mercury is just rational, right? But in this context, if moon represents emotional mind, and if Mercury is more rational, logical mind, how those two things are working together and where they're at in their cycle together gives you a lot of good information. If it's new phase, they're just figuring things out, right? Like they've just come together. So there's a new type of energy. Hey, how do we do this? There can be more instinctual, more sort of, hey, just starting a brand new cycle together, those parts of myself. But think about how different that feels than if they were in balsamic, right? Which is, you might also call it the waning crescent, right? If people are more familiar with that. Then they've been together doing this dance, this cycle for a long time. They're about to wrap up something up. So those two parts of ourselves are going to interact differently. And then there's all the stops in between, So for me, knowing even that simple knowledge of, I'm looking at my little list here. So if we look at moon and Venus, and if moon represents me, myself, and Venus represents we, where I'm at in integrating that, if I know that it's new and that's a brand new thing, I'm going to understand my need to explore relationships and discover that sort of balance between me and my relationships. It's going to have a really different flavor than if it's full phase, right? Where I'm kind of at this culmination, right? And so my experience of those parts of myself will be different. Ashlyn, what would you add? I mean, I feel like I could probably go on for a long time, but we don't necessarily want to do that now.
You were just perfect. And I don't think I can be as eloquent, but my suggestion or my idea to this is just like start from void of course. Why do we call the moon is void of course? Because moon doesn't make any geometric aspect. So, and that's where it becomes imperative to understand that moon needs flavors. So, and through these phases, we understand the flavors. It's not necessarily aspects. We need to kind of differentiate the aspects and phases.
Yeah.
So what is an aversion can actually fall into a phase, which, so as Tara said, to kind of derive information from moon's relationship with other planets, it's important to understand the color of the moon. So moon kind of exhibits different colors when it forms a relationship with different planets. So the moon's color is not the same as it was with Mercury when it is with Jupiter. So now you mentioned the difference between what is me and we. So the moon Venus kind of bridges this idea of me and we. Moon is very, very personal. And moon is always indicative of what we want, the selfish attitude within us, not in a negative way, but in a positive way. Because we all need wants. We all need wants.
Yeah.
We all want something. So, and we are all emotionally attached towards something. And when we need to let it go, or when we need to kind of, put something ahead of our own wants, there, if we need to find that information, we can kind of look at the planetary phases, especially moon in relation to other planets. So moon and Mercury conjunction is basically bridging of heart and mind. Heart in the sense moon, while Mercury is mind. Um, so which is the conjunction of both heart and mind, which means we always have this agreement between mind and the heart. It's not that I want something, but in reality I might need something. But in this case, it might be that both my wants and needs are the same. So the rational and emotional uh, selfishness or whatever we want is always in line together. And when Mercury is there in one place, and as moon starts moving, moon starts developing its own color as it separates from Mercury, and moon starts gaining individuality when it keeps separating with each and every movement that moon kind of makes from Mercury. There is this development of original moon's color, and that kind of gives us the information as to how much the person is going to kind of deal with emotions and rational. So when the moon culminates from Mercury, it's almost like there is this battle between the heart and the mind. Uh, and it becomes a little difficult to kind of bridge heart and mind together. So we are always at this crossroads. And it is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a good thing, because on the one hand, we have perspectives that are rational, and on the other hand, we also know what we want. So you write down what you want and decide what you need to do that is relevant to that particular time in your life, and then move on and kind of achieve whatever you want at a later point of time. So there is never going to be this agreement as it is when the moon kind of shifts away from Mercury. But I think it's a very beautiful uh, journey if you observe from Mercury to the moon, that one full circle. And you can even observe in transits. It doesn't mean that you have to kind of get to this secondary progression and see. So I mean, just look at the time when you have this Mercury return every year, and try to observe when the transiting moon conjuncts your return Mercury, and then you start observing what happens every time the moon walks through the 12 signs of the zodiac. I think that is how we also learned a lot of things. So yeah, so the moon Mars is entirely different story, and Saturn, it's like that is another very, very different uh, flavor that the moon gains. So yeah, many people think that Saturn and moon is bad, but Jyotish says that Saturn and moon is determination and grit.
I
So
can see that.
yeah,
Absolutely.
so we can analyze. And one more thing, I think we might have discussed this earlier, but we can always kind of bridge the significations of both the planets that we are working with, and try to kind of analyze how the moon's separation from that particular planet indicates some of those changes in our lives. And you can easily observe this in transit. It is very, very observable phenomenon. So you can just straight away kind of have this internal realization that something is really happening as to what is going on outside. So in most of my lunation newsletters, I always kind of implement these ideas, because Robert Hand once said that transits might not be necessarily mundane or very, very visceral at an event manifestation level in our lives, but it is almost always internal. So we always feel the pain. So whenever, not necessarily pain only, but also the free happiness and the jubilation whenever it is indicated. But whenever Saturn and Mars are conjunct, and it's always a period where I go through this major period of stress. So now Mars is very, very close to this conjunction with Saturn, and now I already started, feeling that pressure building.
Mhm.
So, and when Saturn and Mars are conjunct, it's like boom, the head starts bursting out of pressure, and life will be very, very crazy. Not necessarily that it's very bad, but it's just the accumulation of things that we have to do in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
maybe you have 10 meetings in a day. So maybe you're writing 2 books at a time. Maybe you're teaching 5 classes in a week. So something like that. So yeah. I mean, maybe always some positive uh ending, but the process is a little challenging, and to kind of derive some of these minute information that makes a lot of sense in our daily lives. I think this book
Yeah.
is very, very useful.
Well,
Yes.
as you're talking, I'm thinking that whether you're looking at phases in a birth chart, whether it's progressions, whether it's transits, knowing where you're at in a cycle is so helpful, right? Just knowing, oh, these parts of me are almost full. That has a whole different feeling, flavor. Like, so part of it to me is bringing it to consciousness, how I can best work with that energy. Because again, how I would approach something if I know I'm wrapping something up versus just getting something going, even to me, even just knowing whether something's in a waxing or a waning phase, even if you don't break it further down than that, already helps know, like, should I be really pushing growing, or am I more reflecting and releasing, and getting kind of a
Yeah.
new way of looking at things. So that's why for me, like, it's like a way of orienting in yourself and in your life. And Ashwin,
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I remember in the past you said that it's like, I think you used ice cream as an example one time. You used 2 examples. You say it's either like going to an ice cream shop and there's like all of a sudden 100 new flavors that you didn't know were there. Or it's like, when you're with like the little painting samples and all of a sudden you have that many more colors. For us with the moon, that's what it gave us. And hopefully to the reader, it gives you that many more flavors and shades of your moon, which
Yeah.
is so perfectly fitting considering it is the thing that shifts and changes the most. So don't you want more of the faces? Don't you want more of the shapes? Yeah.
It's almost like looking at it from this perspective, it's like it brings it down to a more human and embodied experience than
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
transits do. It really just puts it into perspective.
Which is
Yeah.
perfect because, right, traditionally, right, Ashwin, moon is everyday common people. That's when you work
Yeah.
with the moon, it's not fancy pants stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like,
It's right down. So the one of the most important things that this book like can help you is you don't need a real birth time
Mm,
to
Mm-hmm.
employ the techniques in
yep.
this book. I don't think we really mentioned it in the book, but I
Right.
think it just occurred to me. So you don't need an actual birth time. So if you know the birth date,
Yep.
you can just implement the
Yep.
techniques in this book and talk about the planetary phases. And I don't think we mentioned too much about the houses as well. So it's
Mm-mm.
all about, you know, uh, just dealing with the wheel that we have, and uh, enjoy
Yep.
the dynamics of moon in relation to other planets. So if you don't have a birth time, get this book.
Yeah.
I noticed that
I mean,
about the
even
book.
if you have, you surely get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that it would be really helpful for people who don't have that birth, because all you have to do to learn this technique is to, even just pull up a chart and then be able to count. That's all you need. If you can read an analog clock, then you can figure out your phases.
Yep. Yeah.
It is
Yes.
super easy.
It's kind of and I think it's like, for me, I'm actually back to the point of like integrating different things. It makes me remember how, like, I tend to go so like psychological and spiritual that sometimes I'll all of a sudden stop and I'll be like, oh, it just means something simple. Do you know what I mean? Like that is a
Mhm.
reminder, but this I feel like has simple things, but that have
Mhm.
a real layer of depth. And so for me, there's just a lot of value in things that are not too complicated, but that let you into spaces in yourself that you might not go otherwise. So in that way, I say, like, it's a great book for beginners because it has basic stuff on all the planets, but at the same time, it will take you into territory. Like I don't know of another book that has moon with planet phases in it. So I mean,
Yeah.
at least it will open a door to something to experiment with. Yeah. Which is
Yes,
cool.
and it is extremely helpful. It was helpful for me, especially with Moon Mars, because my Moon and Mars are unaspected. But when I was thinking about it, you do have a very like embodied and emotional lunar experience with everything you
Yes.
do. And even in the way that I take action and the way I Martianly pursue things, it is very governed by how I'm feeling. That has such a huge impact on how I'm able to accomplish things.
Yeah. We call it the bridging the action and reaction.
Yep.
Okay. We have a note. Hi, Misty. I'm sorry to disturb you. Okay, so it looks like they have to start a webinar now. So,
We lost
yes,
track of time.
so sorry.
We lost track of time. That's awesome.
We lost track of
Good.
time. Okay, where can our club members find you to follow more of your work?
Well, I think we're on the Kepler website as instructors or teachers, so you can see us there. My website is just my name, Tara, Tara, and then my last name is Aal. It's a lot of A's.com, but you can find my stuff there. And I'm also I do Instagram. You can find a lot of my stuff as well.
I surely
Under my
recommend
name.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Tara's Instagram handle, and yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, I catch up her Instagram live sessions at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning.
You're
Oh my
so
gosh.
good. And
Yeah,
you're
it's amazing. It's amazing. I think it's amazing.
And I feel that way about your emails. I just saw that full moon one pop into my box, so I'm gonna be ready to read it
Yeah,
today.
I'm more
Wonderful.
of a behind the scenes guy. So yeah, I am usually active on Twitter, and I also have my website, which is the abverdict.com, which must give you most information about me. So,
Perfect. Well, thank you both for joining us today. I'm sorry we had to wrap up so quickly.
So,
And I will post more information about our next book of the month in the book club feed. And I will see you all later.
thanks,
Bye.
Misty. Bye, Ashwin.
bye bye.